A very good evening to all of our viewers here on Globespan 24/7. We want to thank you so much for being a part of our audience tonight. I believe tonight we have a very interesting program, having two great sons of Guyana. One, Senior Counsel Ralph Ramkarran, he'll be on shortly. And of course, the leader of the AFC and Member of Parliament, Mr. Khemraj Ramjattan. We want to thank Nohar Singh for making this platform available, and of course, the Devin Biswa, our technical specialist. I also want to welcome Dr. Rose, my co-host, on tonight's program. So, Mr. Ramjattan, in the meantime, as Mr. Ramkarran is coming on board, we want to welcome you again to this program tonight.
Thank you very much, Charles, and it's good to be in your program. I get the impression that you people, you and Dr. Rose, getting me after months after. I would prefer to be there quickly and regularly, but me and you can talk about that. But it's wonderful to be in your program again, and of course, discussing these issues, controversies, disputes, whatever they are, and that is going to make our democracy a better one, especially from people like you asking the questions. So a very good night to you and Dr. Rose.
I will hold you to that. So I'll bring you on more regularly.
And you are, of course, being part of the political landscape of Guyana. It's important that we hear from you. And tonight, I'm sure there's a lot of questions that we would like answers to, and we hope we can get some of those answers. Dr. Rose, welcome to the program tonight.
Thank you, Charles. Thanks.
All right, Mr. Ramjattan, in the meantime, before we get in, I think Devin is trying to get Mr. Ramkarran. As you know, the Chief Justice recently ruled that the election petition filed by the coalition was thrown out. She said, really, it has no, well, I don't want to use the word merit, but she said it was the framework for which the petition was filed is that the legality and constitutionality of Order 60 of Section 22 of the Election Laws Amended Act and the Representation of the People's Act. The Chief Justice says that petitioner did not present any evidence to prove that there were electoral irregularities that would have affected the outcome of the elections. What say you, Mr. Ramjattan?
There is absolutely no need for her to indicate, you know, very senior members of the bar that argue the case, that we had to produce evidence. And if you can bear me out, I think that is a fundamental flaw of the decision. And in that context, then, I would want to say that when you are attacking the legality or the constitutionality of something, you do not have to bring evidence of irregularities. And the precedent that ensured that that is the principle of law, that you don't have to bring evidence, was the Esther Pereira case. Remember in that, the Guyana government then, who was a member of parliament of the PPP and the PNC, agreed that we must have not the national ID card that we have to go and vote. We must come up with a new voter ID card. And the Pereira brought an elections petition in which she argued that there are two requirements for that the Constitution indicates must be the requirements for a voter to vote. One is to be 18 years, and the other is that you be registered. There is no that you have to have a card. And by virtue of that, she said that elections, by virtue of the voter ID card, was null and void, simply on that ground, and that is where it ended. And another elections, and then called that another election. Similarly here, we have a scenario whereby we are saying that there is a certain election regime, and that regime was not adhered to strictly. because of the problems of the elections itself, they went outside by utilization of a Section 22 of the Elections Law Act, and then by virtue of another order made under that Section 22, stating that they could ensure a resolution of the difficulties by virtue of what is called a recount. The legal regime is simply that you have to get the returning officers calling out the results, and then the chief executive officer, Lowenfield, would then advise the commission. That is the existing constitutional and legal framework. Our lawyers are arguing strenuously, and we did so in a compelling and cogent fashion, that that is the legal regime, and you can't go and agree, notwithstanding the president, the opposition leader, and even the CARICOM team and so on could agree to go outside of the law. It is a legally puristic point, or a pure legal point, if I may say, and I feel that it has some merits. Now, we lost there, but there was absolutely no need for evidence of irregularities when you are making that legal point. And it has to do with a fundamental doctrine of our Constitution, an all-written Constitution, and that is the doctrine of separation of powers. Namely, that the legislature must make the law, the executive must execute the law in accordance with its making of the legislature, and the judicial branch must interpret the law. What we saw here by Order 60 emanating out of Section 22 was something we are saying that the Elections Commission could not have legislated. Now, there is argument on the other side, and Ralph, Senior Counsel, is going to talk about that, is that there was a certain section in the elections law that could accommodate this. We are saying, no, you cross a red line by virtue of saying you could resolve a difficulty here. You're supposed to ensure that the legal regime is what is made operable in the circumstances.
All right, Mr. Ramjattan, thanks. Let's get Mr. Ramkarran in. Mr. Ramkarran, welcome to the program. And I asked Mr. Ramjattan about the legality. The petitioner, according to the Chief Justice, did not present any evidence to prove that there were electoral irregularities that would have affected the outcome of the election. Mr. Ramjattan is saying that there was no need to provide evidence. This was more a constitutional requirement. What do you interpret that to mean?
Well, you know, there are two limbs under the provision that you can challenge an election petition. One is a violation of law, and the other is one is a violation of law. As you remember, in the Esther Pereira petition, the court held that the requirement for a voter ID was unconstitutional, and on that basis, the election was vitiated. So that was a violation of law. In this case, the petitioners asked for two things. One, a violation of law, and they also went on the second limb, a violation of law that resulted in the election itself being the votes being affected as a result of the violation of some legal provisions. So the Chief Justice said, in relation to that limb, you have to show how the votes were affected by that violation of a legal provision. So on that second limb, and that is why she ruled that there was no evidence. On that second limb.
But again, Mr. Ramjattan, sorry, Doc, I'm coming in. The Chief Justice also said there was no breach of violation or non-compliance by GCOM with the Constitution or the law covering elections, such as to make this election a sham or a travesty as claimed by the petitioner, which is the coalition. What about that ruling with the Chief Justice?
Yeah, well, there is where we are very disappointed in her ruling there, and feel that indeed, by virtue of the GCOM coming outside of that legal regime that we just mentioned, and even Ralph agreed to, the first limb. We feel that her interpretation of what the Constitution is, namely this very broad term, they can give instructions to ensure fairness, compliance, and impartiality. That is where she pegged her decision that in the process, GCOM has certain powers under the Constitution. And she felt that by virtue of going to resolve certain difficulties, it was not going to the legislative branch. Remember, GCOM is an executive body. It executes the law. And the body that is supposed to make the law to ensure, let's say in this case, that returning officers' counts are not valid should be Parliament itself, not the GCOM. And by virtue of making an order to ensure that, we are saying, because the line, that is GCOM, and we were arguing with the judge to make the ruling that that line was crossed. She said, no, it was not.
Well, Mr. Ramjattan.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but there was no parliament. Parliament was dissolved. There was a problem at GCOM. What would GCOM do? She also said she found that Section 22 of the Election Laws Amendment Act was properly used to activate the recount procedures of the Representative of the People Act. So in the absence of a parliament, GCOM had a problem that they created by themselves with the shenanigans that went on in Region 4. What should GCOM do then? Should they ask the president to call back parliament? The president cannot do that then.
That is correct. That is the difficulty we all have. And that is the painful exercise here. What then should be the position? The judge and GCOM has taken that as the position. And it is a formidable position. One is not arguing against the formidableness of it. However, we are saying that if you want the rule of law, if you want constitutionalism, and you want the doctrine of separation of powers, there is a collision here. And that collision, as we have argued, that the lawyer Jeremy John very articulately, that you allow the counts of the returning officers, and if you feel offended by those results, you then take an elections petition. You go for an elections petition. Now, just hear me out for 2 minutes here. In 2006, the identical thing happened with the Alliance for Change in relation to its seat in Region 10. The SOPs indicated that we had about 800 more votes, which would have given us 2 seats in Region 10. We went, Steve Surajbali and Gokul Budu. And Gokul Budu said, with Steve Surajbali, that the legal regime is that once the returning officer makes his pronouncements, that is final. So we said, but look, the thing blasted wrong here. Why are you taking this line? We got 800 more votes. It's a miscalculation. Your arithmetic was wrong. He said, it's done there. Go by elections petition. So that was an administrative precedent that was created there. And that is how we then went and we took our petition. And then Ian Chang took 5 years literally to then do and say that we served out of time. So I am just telling you, look, because these are all very heavy law that we will have to argue in the doctrine of separation of powers. And I respect the decision of our Roxanne George. She's an extremely bright judge. But we should be allowed to carry this, and people shouldn't cuss us down. What are we trying to do? Because with that precedent that we had in relation to the AFC in 2006 is but a violation of that precedent by the GCOM. So let us settle this thing and bring finality to it by, of course, us going straight up to the CCJ. And, you know, people will want to argue that, right, y'all try it with the 33, 34 case, that is the no confidence motion and what the numbers were. Well, even at the Court of Appeal, we had judges that ruled that it should be 34 and not 33.
Yeah,
and
Mr. Ramjattan, you're not standing on solid ground there, because the petition, the things that you guys filed earlier, in my opinion, as a non-attorney, was frivolous, but that's a different story. But Mr. Ramkarran, what Mr. Ramjattan is arguing is that the 2006, the one seat in Linden, that somehow GCOM misappropriated the PPP, I think it's totally different from an entire election for Region 4. When we saw what Mingo was doing publicly, he was shunning the Constitution and throwing everything down the road. Is it the same thing we're arguing what Mr. Ramjattan is saying?
Well, the Chief Justice went at pains. What she said was the elections were attended by difficulty. And she went at pains to relate these difficulty at length. She reviewed all the problems which had affected the elections, including the cases which had been filed, and all of that. And she said that under Article 162 or 163, that the Elections Commission has a duty and a mandate to ensure that the elections are properly held and that the election officers carry out their functions properly in accordance with law. She laid that down as a principle. And those difficulties having occurred, she then said that it's Section 22 of the Election Laws Amendment Act was properly invoked. She said that Section 22 there provided for the resolution of difficulties of the type that had occurred in these elections. So she gave a quite logical decision, a quite logical reasoning. And while the petitioners who represented the opposition, really, the petitioners have every right to appeal the decision of the court. This is really a final decision. This is what the court has ruled, and this is what stands. We don't know we don't have what is called leapfrogging. That is to say, you can jump from the High Court to the CCJ. The passage of the matter has to traverse the Court of Appeal in Guyana. We don't know what the Court of Appeal will do. The history has shown, recent history has shown, in the 33-34 case, recent history has shown that the Court of Appeal can well depart from a decision of the High Court, even a decision of Justice George. So we don't know what will happen in the Court of Appeal. The matter has to be argued there. But for the time being, the position is that the government is lawful on the basis of a decision of the High Court.
All right, Dr. Rose.
Good night, Mr. Ramkarran. And
Good.
Mr. Ramjattan again. I want to take you all on a different path. Quickly, do you think the election petitioners stand a chance in the Court of Appeals? Mr. Ramjattan?
I think so. I think it is very meritorious arguments that were proffered, and the doctrine of separation of powers is a fundamental doctrine that must be strictly interpreted. But yes, indeed, that argument that was just related by Ralph was what myself and Ralph had argued inside of Esther Pereira. Ralph will remember that. In Article 162, it is, Ralph, not 163. 162, it states the position quite clearly that the Elections Commission has powers to do certain things in accordance with the law and to provide impartiality and to ensure fairness. What we had done there in that Esther Pereira case was to say that we had passed a law for voter ID cards, and everything we had done during that 1997 period And still, the judge ruled that notwithstanding, y'all are, you agreed to it and you went to the parliament and you passed not an order, you passed a statute that says voter ID card is the basis. And you said that it is, in a way amending the Constitution. She still ruled that the doctrine of separation is so, you got to stick with it totally, that she ruled it was unconstitutional. So look, that is why I'm saying here, Charles and Dr. Rose, appreciate it for what it is worth. If people can laugh at it, whatever it is. The trouble is that we lawyers have at least the duty to ensure that the jurisprudence is enriched by virtue of a CCJ ruling on the matter. So yes, we are going to appeal it and fight as hard as possible. And if, of course, we lose it, well, then the ruling will have brought finality and certainty to our law, rather than we regret the day that, we had a grand opportunity and we did not appeal Roxanne George's decision.
Mr. Ramkarran, what do you think? Do you have any chance of winning this petition?
I don't think there's any chance of winning this case. The decision is very clear. And the two issues is Section 22, does Section 22 violate the Constitution? And following that, does Order 60, which was given birth to by Section 22, did that also violate the Constitution? And I don't see how they can overcome the arguments which have been presented and the ruling of the Chief Justice. I really, frankly, don't see how that would be possible.
Okay. Now, let me take you all mind from the legal aspect of it and bring you all into my field, professorial mindset here. Now, do you think after 9 months in office, the PP has done a good job? Do they present a positive outlook for the country and the people? And what grade would you give them? A being the highest, D means the lowest, and F for failure on crime, corruption, the economy, unity, development, etc. Mr. Ramjattan.
I certainly will give them an F. They have tried to dismantle almost all the guardrails of good economics and good governance since we came in. And I can identify the areas, the Public Accounts Committee. We fought long and hard in an extremely important reform process. I know that Ralph knows about it. When Prof. Branford and the other two experts on parliamentary affairs came and did reports here, in which they all agreed that the Public Accounts Committee must be chaired by a man appointed from the opposition. Today we have Gail Teixeira and Bishop Edghill, stating that they would like him to be removed from there. And they're using the basis that he has been charged. Well, the last opposition had Irfan Ali there, and he had 19 charges. As soon as he became president, the DPP dropped all the charges. So once you make a ruling and a precedent that it must come from the main opposition, if we are the opposition and we provided a name, and that name is David Patterson, break it up. And we now know why they're trying to break it up, because of the fact that they do not want an investigation by the Auditor General into the tractors that SACE bought. SACE is a good partner of you too. And so we want Guy Suko to be investigated in relation to that. And plus the COVID funds. A lot of COVID monies were misdistributed. And that is what we want. They're trying to get rid of him. The second point has to do with constitutional agencies. Constitutional agencies are like the judiciary, parliament, the Judicial Service Commission, and so on. We fought long and hard in a very robust constitutional reform process that these entities must have not only on paper a declaration that they will give their decisions, and their decision-making process will be with a lot of independence. We then gave, like a number of developed countries have done, what is called financial autonomy to these entities. The parliament, the judiciary, the judicial commission, the civil service commission, and all the various other the procurement commission, and so on. And we had passed a bill whilst we had a majority in opposition that indeed these, if they ask for $500 million to do their work during the course of the year, they must get the $500 million. Unlike budget agencies, which get their money based on what is called the allocations from the Minister of Finance. So that is what we did. That bill, although it was passed by the majority opposition, was never assented to by Donald Ramotar. As soon as we won the election in 2015, we then passed another bill to ensure the financial autonomy of these bodies. And in 2020, now that the government is new, their PPP government, they went and they derailed that guardrail, as it were.
So you'll give them an F grade?
Economic issues in which we find that there is discrimination, the COVID funds, and they, we fought long and hard with this decision of Gaisuko. We know that Gaisuko is a black hole for a large set of monies that is going to flow their way. But it is a constituency of the PPP, and so you're going to find monies is going to be poured into it. Although sugar is being sold for $300 US per ton, and you're producing it at $600 US per ton. That is bad business for any government. And so these are the main issues that I have with them. Wanting to spend much more on sugar when you can take that money and ensure that because of the oil riches that will be brought into this country, ensure that your country, the cane cutters' sons and daughters, move out of that business. You wean them away from it. Train them into different areas, intensive agriculture, more scientific methods, give them a loan for certain mechanization and so on, and that kind of thing, with the monies that we now got, over 326 million at the Federal Reserve. So I give them an F.
Okay.
And the fact that they do talk to the leader of the opposition, although the leader of the opposition is saying that they're in you, because you are the government of the day. What's the big deal? Talk to them, because knowing the polarization in Guyana, you can have a huge problems if you don't engage. America engages with Russia and China. Other countries that are belligerents find time to talk with each other. Why we can't talk?
Okay.
F for them.
F for them. Okay, but I want to just make this correction. Say Singh only bought 2 tractors, and 33% of the sugar workers are APNU or PNC supporters. They're blacks. So we got to be very careful with that. Mr. Ramkarran, what have you to say? What grade would you give to them after being 9 months in office?
Well, if you wanted to have somebody to speak for and defend the government, you should have had a PPP leader or member or executive or some kind of thing here. But on the Public Service Commission, not public service, the Public Accounts Committee, that provision for the chair to be a member of the opposition is a very old provision. And my father was the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee in the 70s. So it's a very old provision, but
you're talking about Boise Ramkarran.
Yeah, but
okay.
But the issue about David Patterson is not that he was charged, as far as I read. I can't speak for the PPP, but as far as I'm informed by the press, the issue relating to Patterson is his receipt of a gift. That was the issue. But if Patterson does not want to resign. I understand is that noise coming from my source?
I don't know. There's a feedback coming somewhere.
I don't have anything on.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
If Patterson doesn't want to resign, I understand there was a motion of no confidence. Then there's a procedure to get him to resign. They they convene a meeting and so on. Usual parliamentary procedure. But I noticed that I read in the papers also that the clerk wrote for some legal advice as to who can become the speaker or the chairman, whether it has to be another opposition member or it can be a member of the government. And he received advice from some legal stores. And I think the advice is wrong because the advice says that a temporary chairman doesn't have to be a member of the opposition. So I think that that's not correct.
Mr. Ramkarran,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. Can we take a break because there seems to be a technical problem with the audio?
Oh, sure. Okay.
Allfromonesupplier.com has all your grocery needs, plus all of your West Indian items. Purchase all your groceries and all your West Indian items from one place and get free delivery to your homes and free shipping. Allfromonesupplier.com has free deliveries locally in New York and free shipping to all U.S. states. Our shoppers choose the best items, packaged nicely, and delivered to your home. We have all your grocery needs and all your West Indian items, a one-stop shop. So place all your orders on allfromonesupplier.com or call 718-551-3292. That's online at allfromonesupplier.com or call 718-551-3292. Get all your groceries and all your West Indian items from allfromonesupplier.com with free deliveries and free shipping to all U.S. states. TravelSpan offers all airlines, such as American, Caribbean, and JetBlue. So let TravelSpan compare all airlines and offer you the best fare. Call TravelSpan at 718-845-0437 for the lowest deals between New York, Miami, and Guyana. That's TravelSpan at 718-845-0437. Call TravelSpan in New York at 718-845-0437, Georgetown at 227-1701, or Berbice at 337-4287. In New York, 718-845-0437, Georgetown 227-1701, or Berbice 337-4287, and West Coast Demerara at 269-0140. Let TravelSpan book you the best deals for you and your families.
Yes, Mr.
Welcome
Ramkarran.
back to our viewers. We want to thank you for staying on. Yes, Mr. Ramkarran, you were saying when we went to break, you were discussing.
Yes, I was saying that if the opposition, that the issue with Mr. Patterson also has to do with the fact that he received a gift from a government agency, a bracelet. But if the government wants to remove Mr. Patterson from the chairmanship for that reason or other reasons, there's a procedure, there's a parliamentary procedure where they can vote to remove him from the office, and or they can, in the meantime, if he steps down, in the meantime, appoint and nominate, elect another member of the opposition to take its place. But that looks like that's a storm in a teapot. That's neither here nor there. In the public independence of constitutional bodies, that's a matter started since 1999 when the Elections Commission recommended that these bodies be given their own budgets. We worked very hard in the parliament to ensure that that happened. even for the parliament to have its own budget. The government never budged. That was in the time of the PPP government. The government never budged. And none of the institutions, the Supreme Court, the Parliament, the other constitutional bodies, Elections Commission. Well, the Elections Commission did have their own budget because they couldn't mess about with the Elections Commission at all. But I'm glad to see that the situation has changed. I'm glad to see it's changed. I hope there is no reversal of that position. But that's not really the issues relating to the government. I mean, we've had this big gold scholarship started, 20,000 scholarships are being offered to children. We had this, the COVID funds being distributed. We have the housing program has restarted. You have the economy. You have the a project for the gas to shore project. I know there are lots of criticisms and questions about that, but it's there. It's likely going to happen. So a lot of things are happening in the country that are casting a very positive light on the government and its position. And not everything is going as well as they should. But nevertheless, I think there's some confidence in the country. There's some hope and expectation, and not everything is due to the government. There's also the fact that we have petroleum, and that we're getting oil, while the oil funds are there and not yet being spent. That by itself adds a great deal of optimism. Now, there are a lot of people, and as a lawyer, I know that from my legal practice. I don't know if Khemraj knows that, but there's a lot of investment that is going on in the country from overseas, from local people, and lots of jobs are being created. That started during PNC times, but it has escalated quite tremendously during this period. Last year was a bad year because of the COVID, but things have picked up substantially this year. So I don't see this F grade at all. It's not my job to A or B or C or F the government. That's for people,
Okay.
people
Okay.
people of the PPP who want to come and do that kind of stuff. I write now and again about some of these things, but I don't agree that there's an F grade.
Okay. Mr. Ramkarran, you campaign in your party, ANOG, on constitutional reform, among other issues. But I want to look at what have you done since to advance your campaign promise or campaign strategy on constitutional reform?
Well, we haven't done much because there hasn't been any opening really to do a great deal. We all have been one in the COVID situation, and then two, our party is recuperating from the situation here. We haven't been able to hold elections and to reconstruct our executive and that sort of thing. And that is happening as I speak. And once that is finished, we will resume our campaign. But let's face the fact, the type of constitutional reform we spoke about is not going to happen. The two large parties are not interested in a system of government where there is a form of collaboration, enforced collaboration between the two parties. So that is not going to happen. Both parties have called for inclusive governance. Well, the framework for inclusive governance is there, and maybe that is something that we will take up. The framework is there. The framework was put in place in 1999. You have sectoral committees in the National Assembly. You have constitutional commissions for Amerindians, for child, for ethnic relations, for human rights, and a whole host of things. Now, these bodies, including the parliamentary bodies, are not funded. They can't do any work. They don't do anything. When I was there as speaker, I tried my level best to get these sectoral committees to give reports to the parliament. never successful because they didn't have the capacity to do so. So one of the things that we probably will need to look at is to bring capacity to bear on the systems that have already been established to ensure the inclusive governance that both parties are talking about to proceed. Now, the PPP talks about constitutional reform, but I don't know how it's difficult to figure out what they're saying. They're saying constitutional reform is for the people. Well, if you are setting up a process of constitutional reform, surely you need to say what you expect the outcome to be. Surely you will have proposals. But this saying that constitutional reform was the people and we will have to wait on the people and hear what they say is a whole load of rubbish. I mean, I was in that process already a long time ago, but I still remember it clearly. When you go to Indian areas, lots of people want guns. When you go to African areas, people want ancestral lands. Now, these are not matters that you can deal with in a constitution. You can probably translate those things to mean that Indian people are concerned about their security and look at the structures in the constitution. That is why, for the first time since 1999, the constitution refers to military. And I think it refers to the police, but certainly refers to the security system. That is where it came from. The ancestral land is not a matter for the Constitution. I have written repeatedly. There was a debate in the National Assembly on a motion by the late Debbie Baker calling for a commission to look at ancestral lands. And that debate was very revealing. In fact, it was more revealing from what Frank Anthony, then Minister of Sport, said, because he gave a whole background of African ownership of lands. And Debbie Baker was saying, look, we don't want any land that we never owned. All we want is for communal lands to be given to the people who occupy them. And lands where the forefathers have left and vanished and abandoned and have like children property, but their great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren regularize those occupations. So that didn't require the Constitution. It required only a commission to work and establish it. And I've written about it, and unfortunately, the PPP went in office, did nothing about it. And the APNU+AFC went in office, also did nothing about it. Instead of focusing on the specific problems, the specific issues relating to African lands, they set up a commission with the late Reverend who just died, Chakusang, to investigate lands without any focus. And the report, the report hasn't been published. Nobody is reading the report. But you have to have specific focus on people's problems.
Okay, I want to come to that to Mr. Ramjattan. Mr. Ramjattan, you know the AFC has always been for reforming of the Constitution. But in 2015, along with APNU, you campaigned on constitutional reform. Prime Minister Nagamootoo commissioned Nigel Hughes and give him the permission to do it. He wrote an extensive report, and I read part of the report was about a couple of years back. But Mr. Granger squashed that report, and Mr. Granger words, I do not want my presidency to be weakened, and I do not want people sitting in an office to write the Constitution. They must be out there doing it. What have you to say, Mr. Ramjattan?
Yeah, well, I think that we made progress in keeping with our promise by virtue of having that Nigel Hughes commissioned report. It was an important document as to the method of how we move forward, how we will allow people's participation. The Constitution must come, as the PPP is rightly saying, from the sentiments of the people of the country. Of course, they sometimes model up their personal interest for ancestral lands and for gun licenses and a whole host of other things. But we have to be, as leaders, know how to parse that kind of demand that they are making. And that is where I suppose the Nigel Hughes Commission report went a very far way and indeed set up the mechanism as to know how you're going to go to these various regions, what you might anticipate, and so on. And then it was put down for purposes of getting the finances now to ensure that you can go and talk to the people so that they could, first of all, as Nigel Hughes indicated, understand what is the existing constitution that we have, and then what are the other amendments they would like to make or the new things that they would like to have in the constitution. That in truth did not happen. It did not happen because there was a variety of interests in the government. Some were saying, as you just mentioned, and there was merit in that. Some others were saying, no, we have to find the financing. The financing would have come up a couple millions of dollars. And people were saying, well, no. And then, of course, when I understand that the Prime Minister was trying to talk to Jagdeo as leader of the opposition on the matter of constitutional reform, Jagdeo wanted nothing to do with Moses Nagamutu. And the thing got stuck there. And then, of course, we had our no confidence motion that kind of skittled even every effort that we could have made thereafter. So look, Ralph has a point, because it would seem that certain interest groups do not want, because they find that there might be benefit in having the Constitution as it is. And to that extent, then, our best efforts into the objective, into realizing this objective, went all right. The Alliance for Change, as you know, still wants constitutional reform. We want to make less powers of the president. We want to bring back a constituency system. At least that is what the majority of my party members are saying. Although I must tell you that at a personal level, the PR is always a good system to have for a third party like the Alliance for Change. Because once you get a constituency system, AFC could, like the party in Trinidad that won 100,000 votes and couldn't get one seat. Whereas a PR system, I am telling my party supporters, is far better, because if you go separately, you can have your 5 seats or 7 seats and things like that. So it requires a lot more to be done, but I believe that we must not give up. We have to go and educate the people out there that, okay, you want your gun, you want your ancestral lands, but constitution design requires these things. And I think that is a kind of a, where they don't have that knowledge or information to discern the difference between self-interested things like guns and property as against these more, what you call, obtuse areas and esoteric areas of human rights and fundamental freedoms and so on. These people, sometimes you go talk to them, they say, you're mocking me about talking about freedom of expression. Why know about freedom of expression? I want a piece of land to grow something to mind my wife and pick me. So you got to understand that too. But we as leaders got to understand that these things are necessary. The more esoteric and which has been the Constitution.
Charles, over to you.
Yeah, I think Mr. Ramkarran hit the hammer on the head, the nail on the head there, because based on what Mr. Ramjattan just said, I believe that neither the PNC nor the PPP is interested in a constitutional reform. It's only rhetoric, and it's only, I think, hot air. But Mr. Ramkarran, I just want to get back to one thing you said. In your meeting, you said that the Guyanese of Indian descent wanted guns, and the Guyanese of African descent want ancestral land back. But my point to you is the ancestral land that the Africans had It wasn't taken away by the Indians who have it. It was sold to them. So there you have a huge problem now to give back those lands to the African community, which is rightly theirs, but they sold it to the Indians who has it. What do you do then?
No. I'm referring to a debate which took place in the National Assembly during the term that I was Speaker. And that debate should be, the record of that debate should inform any kind of issue or discussion relating to ancestral lands. And two speeches should be referred to: the speech of the late Debbie Backer, who sponsored the motion for a commission, and the speech of Frank Anthony. Those records are there. And the combination of those two speeches gives a complete history. Well, not a complete history, but a narrative history within an hour of what the problems of land in the African community are. And they didn't say how those problems can be resolved, but they can be easily resolved with the legal mechanisms that we now have in Guyana, that exists now. That is the land registry system. The system we call the land registry system, which is provided for in the Land Registry Act. So it requires money, of course. So those issue of ancestral lands are definable, not like Lincoln Lewis when his grandfather or great grandfather abandoned land. I don't know how many decades ago, and he go in and dig posts in land that people acquire or occupy. I ain't talking about that kind of story. That is not ancestral lands. So that is what we need to do as far as ancestral lands are concerned. When Indians are talking about guns, I mean, not all Indians or all Africans. They have many other concerns. We had 4,000 submissions made to us. We had meetings all over the country, Guyana, all over. Plus, we had meetings in Georgetown with people coming in and bringing documents and making presentations and all of that. So we went around the country and had the same kind of thing that everybody is advocating now, as if it never happened before. Now, when people were talking about guns and all of that, you have to translate that into what they're talking about. They're concerned about their security. Now, that really is not a constitutional matter. That's a police matter. You have to fund the police more, train them more, give them better equipment and all this kind of thing. I remember talking to Khemraj one time when the police were having some success during the term that he was a minister. There was some drop in crime and so on. And I asked him what's responsible. He said the better relation between the community, better relation between the community and the police. Those things are not things that a policeman can learn how to do. Those things require extensive training by serious experts. Community relations between community and police helps. Look at all the crimes, or 99%. Well, I don't know about 99, but 90+% of crimes are solved by intelligence. Look at the solution of the two crimes of the two teenagers who were killed. There was a man in the United States. I saw the program on Netflix. I forget the name of it. He was called the devil. I forget his name. He went around and killed a lot of people and so on. Invaded their homes and killed people. This man killed about 15 people or so, and they couldn't find him out. No clues or anything could help them. Eventually, they found him by intelligence. Most crimes are solved by intelligence. How they found the young lady who was brutally shot and buried and so on? She's missing for a month. How did they find by intelligence? So
Yeah.
the answer is that those are the things that the police need, and those are the things that people are talking about. Not like the policeman who stopped me today for not stopping at the red light, when in fact the light was blinking. I nearly went crazy. I have a driver because I have suffered from age. I suffer from age, age and poor vision. So I have a driver, and he's extremely careful because he drives my grandchildren. So he knows how to be cautious. He came down the street at Avenue of the Republic, and there is an arrow that blinks. The main light shows red, but there's an arrow that blinks. It stops blinking periodically, but it blinks. So we turned on the arrow into Avenue of the Republic, and the police stopped and accusing my driver of not stopping at a red light. Well, I went ballistic. You don't want those kinds of policemen who wait. You know what they wait after the Khemraj know what they do when they're waiting after traffic lights. When they go down the traffic lights and wait, he knows what they want.
Exactly.
That's a good point, Mr. Ramkarran, because I want to bring that to Mr. Ramjattan, being the former minister of public security. Recently, the motorcycle bandits have been in the uprising again. We've seen a lot of videos where these guys just pull up in a motorcycle, rob people, and they go on the way. And what Mr. Ramkarran just said there, I just came back from Guyana, and everywhere you go, you see like 5, 6 policemen, traffic cops, stopping vehicle on the road every time, for whatever reason, I don't know. And you got these guys robbing people on motorcycle. Nothing is being done. The policemen are there harassing the drivers. I'm calling it harassing because it's a daily exercise where you have 5, 6 policemen stopping cars all over the place. Mr. Ramjattan, question to you is, what strategies you had in place to help mitigate the problem of what we're seeing now with the bandits on the streets?
Well, the strategy was, of course, having more smart city projects, of having these cameras and the cameras working so that at the Lindal Command Center, you could literally see them. And we caught so many of them. I understand a number of the cameras are not even working now. And that is terrible. And that is why I'm saying that there has been a dismantling. And that is why I still maintain my F grade. Security is a major problem. These guys now stopping you all over the place. I used to send around some people, another policeman, to show what was going on in the road there. And unless it was congested traffic, where they go and they ensure that the traffic is directed and so on, they must not be in the streets. What you're doing there? Why are you stopping these vehicles? And I had lots and lots of problems, and we changed to the traffic chief as a result of that. Please do not allow these guys to do these things. And of course, we had Mr. Ramkarran and Mr. Leslie James ensuring that they pull them off the streets. What they're doing there, they have to account. And the other thing was that we then bought over 200 of these things that they could wear to ensure what they're doing there when they're there. It's called body cams. I noticed that the cams are now in, but somehow they're not being utilized. And there seems a drastic reduction in the professionalism in the police force. That is another point that I would like to give them F in. All of these reforms that Russell Coombe from the British security sector had recommended, and which we said we are going to employ with the use of monies from the oil monies and all of that for the 2020-21 period, by virtue of the British saying that we only funding the reforms at a theoretical level, the implementation level, we'll have to now do about 11 reports in relation to what to do with marine, for the piracy, for the road traffic, for budgeting for police. Nothing has taken off since the installation of this government. And we're not hearing from Mr. Ben in relation to these matters. So I've been asking, what has been happening to those reforms? You got to be talking also to the international people. The Americans, you got to be all the time talking to. The Surinamis, in relation to the crossings that are happening there, people getting away with robberies over that thing, and getting, the Commissioner of Suriname and the Commissioner of Guyana working together. So, I mean, apart from cost of living, this security thing must mean that they get an F3. And yes, it's right. These things are not constitutional matters, but there's security. Police got to do it, and we have all the reforms done, and it's there. I hope it will not be shelved.
But Mr. Ramjattan, under your waters minister, we still had the same problem. I didn't think it disappeared.
No, we did not have the problem there. A lot of people were saying, I don't know if you were in the country, but a lot of people were saying at least these police are behaving a little more pressure. Good morning, sir. You used to literally have to tell them what to talk to these people about. But it has all gone back, right back. And that is why all kinds of motorcyclists, we used to lock up plenty of the motorcyclists because a lot of those motorcyclists were stolen from Brazil and brought here. And the registration exercise, that is why we had Pastor Dooley Chand training, and helping out. The same pastor that went and said that he praying for the police force. That man, when he was there as the pastor, or what you call it, chaplain, I indicated the Sila, make sure, because this man is an activist kind of chaplain. What they tried to do the man the other day? And that man was telling me and giving me information about these motorbike being stolen from Brazil and coming into Guyana, beating all the duties and so on that you got to pay. Look, it was a lot that was done under my administration. I'm not saying that we got it right all the time, but at least you are professionalizing the police. And
okay, let's switch to let's switch to something else. Let's talk about the oil and gas. As we heard, we have $300 million in the reserve in the bank in New York. Mr. Ramjattan, your colleague who was Minister of Energy then, he said that he was instructed to sign the Exxon production sharing agreement. Two questions to you. One, was it a good agreement? And secondly, who instructed Mr. Raphael Trotman to sign that agreement?
Raphael brought the discussions that happened with the people from GGMC and the team that met the Exxon people, and tried to indicate that this is the agreement that the people are talking about. They will only increase royalty by 1% more. They are going to give a signature bonus. They're going to do a couple things, but they are not going to vary from that agreement that was made when they sign up the exploration agreement. And inherent in that exploration agreement is that if they find oil, this is the model that they will take and agree to for exploitation purposes. We bargained hard. I know that Raphael Trotman bargained hard and ended up not going any further because people said, well, they could go and explore more rather than start exploitation. And then he brought it to the cabinet. We had massive debates as to why we shouldn't go further and further. A lot of things happened. To the extent then, Exxon is an extremely hard bargain. And we then had to sign up to that. What we did indicate is that now that we're going to know more about oil, that was Lisa 1. We're going to know more about oil, and we're going to expand and give better agreements and licenses. And that is why
No, Mr. Ramjattan, sorry to cut you off there, but no, it was the entire Stabroek block. It wasn't Lisa 1 or Lisa 2. PSA was for the entire block.
We know it was for the entire block, but there are different arrangements that be given for further licensing of other areas in that block. It was not as if all the blocks there, we can negotiate and renegotiate. And we wanted them to ensure as best as possible. Look, we had an interest to ensure that oil is going to come out by 2025, by 2020, 5 years after. We wanted that because we had a lot of other interests that were advising us. The interests stating that oil prices might go down in future because of renewables in solar and wind and thermal. We were being told too that there were other major developments that could happen in the world in which oil prices could go down. What will happen by 2020? And we made the decision. Decision making in these big matters, Charles, is not easy. And from hindsight, you could always cuss us down to say it was not the best deal. But we were not the equals with the firm. The firm could have walked away and said, well, okay, well, leave the oil there. We have at least for 30 years to go and explore. 20 elections is held, and then we will probably talk to the new government or whosoever else.
I with due respect to you, sir, where would Exxon walk away from when they know the Guyana Basin was the best opportunity? Recently, you have read in the press that their cash flows increased substantially now that they're going to buy the ships rather than leasing it. So these people, you rightly said, they're great bargainers. Apparently, on the Guyana side, we had a JV team doing the negotiation, and we did a miserable job in negotiating a contract for Guyana.
Mr. I think that's unfair, Charles. That is being totally unfair.
No, that's a fact. That's a fact.
Well, you could say that. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we have now created the conditions for all those businesses Ralph is talking that is happening now.
Yeah, because but again, Mr. Ramjattan, you're mixing apples and oranges. The fact is Suriname, our next door neighbor, they have far better agreement than us. Brazil have far better agreement than us. We are the worst.
A long time before us.
I know, but we could have learned from them. We could have gone to them and asked for advice. We prefer not to. We had juveniles negotiating a big deal like this with Exxon. Mr. Ramkarran, do you have any comment on that?
Well, the negotiators for the agreement were the GGMC. And I think it was one or two people from the GGMC. Now, I have to be careful what I say about the GGMC because they're clients and very good clients, and they're very good friends. Very good friends.
Conflict of interest.
Good friends of ours. But GGMC are technical people. The commissioner himself spent his entire life in the GGMC. In the petroleum sector. So he's very knowledgeable of the petroleum sector, but he's a technical person. He's knowledgeable in the technical field. He's not a negotiator. Now, I know as a fact, I'm not going to press this as an issue, just to show that the possibilities that exist. President Granger, I don't know if you'll remember, but he had on his desk the name of a person who negotiated oil agreements on behalf of Exxon, who was in private practice, had left Exxon a while back, was in the private sector in the oil industry, and who was prepared to come to Guyana and negotiate, or go to Texas and negotiate the agreement for Guyana on Guyana's behalf. This proposal was put to President Granger and he did not respond to it. All I'm saying is, I'm not saying anything about that man, but what I'm saying is, the possibilities existed for the government of Guyana to present Exxon with an expert negotiating team of people who knew, who had the capacity, who had the technical skills, and who had the learning. to negotiate a deal for Guyana. It would then be for the government of Guyana to decide where to go. Now, what really happened was a couple of guys or ladies from GGMC went and sat down with Exxon and brought back a document that Exxon handed them. Basically, they had no negotiating capacity in the sense that they were not authorized to negotiate on behalf of Guyana. The only authority they had was probably to ask for clarification of what this meant and what that meant. And then come home to Guyana and give the cabinet and said, Cabinet, here is what we have. And then Raphael Trotman would have gone to Exxon and said, we want this, that, and the other. But Raphael Trotman is a politician. He's not a negotiator. Raphael Trotman is a lawyer. He's not a petroleum expert. That's what I have to say. That's where really where we all fell down.
Well, Mr. Ramkarran, you in direct contrast to what Mr. Ramjattan said. He said they had an agreement that they fought for. You're saying something totally different. So which one is it?
When Trotman came, I presume, I don't know what happened, but I presume Trotman went to and fro. I presume when the cabinet discussed the matter, Trotman would have gone to the Exxon and said, this is what the government wanted. And the Exxon would say, no way. I suppose some negotiation took place between Exxon and Mr. Trotman. But as I said, Mr. Trotman is not a negotiator, and he's not involved in, he knows nothing about petroleum.
The man got an A in the master's program in negotiation.
Charles, I must tell you too, that we were constrained, because all will not come at the same time, by the model that the PPP government had left us with. Bharat Jagdev and a lot of them are now indicating that because you find oil, oh yeah, you could have done a whole lot of other things. It is not true, because inherent in that exploitation or exploration agreement, the exploration was a model that if we find oil, this is basically what will be the basic framework for the exploitation agreement. And we were constrained by that too. And look, you know, it is always a thing that people could criticize by hindsight. But all right, we now have $326 million there. We could have had $742 million, whatever. How do we utilize the 326, which will go into the billions in a couple of years' time, and ensure that we have a good country? That is what we want. We went and do an act called the Natural Resources Fund Act, and state in that act 3 distinct bureaucratic committees, labor, people, civil society, and so on, must have a say in this thing. You know what the PPP now wants to do? What Jagdev, the control freak he is? He wants to ensure that the thing be repealed, so his Ministry of Finance will have the biggest say. And that is crazy, because that is why I now could understand why they jacked up the borrowings level, the ceiling for borrowings, rather than go into that money where the Federal Reserve Bank. We could spend so much more money on the COVID, professionalize our police force from that same money. But it's because a whole set of non-politicians will have to help make the decision. They don't want to go there.
Yeah, Mr. Ramjattan, I want to bring Dr. Rose in, but before Dr. Rose come in, I just want to let you know this, that the coalition missed a great opportunity. They have squandered it. They could have got a $1 billion signing bonus. Exxon could not walk and go anywhere. Guyana is their only hope right now, and they're going to get billions and billions from our resource. APNU+AFC could have got $1 billion signing bonus, and they could have won the election with their hands down, but you guys squandered it. Dr. Rose?
All right, that's your opinion, Charles.
I don't know if Exxon could have. I'm not sure that's Exxon only part, but what Mr. Ramkarran mentioned, the gentleman who was working for Exxon and became a negotiator, I knew that gentleman personally, and I sent Raphael Trotman an email telling him to contact this gentleman with all the details and I never heard from him. By the way, let me just do something for one of our sponsors, and that's the Nest Restaurant, folks. It's located at 12517 101 Street in Richmond Hill, Queens. It is one of the best restaurants, not only in Queens, but in the 5 boroughs of New York and perhaps elsewhere. I've been there several times with friends. Charles, you've been there with me as well many times. If you want to dine and have the best memorable moments in your life, go to the Nest Restaurant. It's, as I said to you, even the manager or the owner, Dave, he welcomes every one of his patrons. And when you leave there, you will always want to go back. Again, the Nest Restaurant opens from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. Takeout, you can call 718-847-4035. And that is also a reservation. Now, I want to switch up from oil and go to something else. Mr. Ramkarran, let me ask you this question first before I get to Mr. Ramjattan. Do you think Mr. Lowenfield and Mr. Mingo should have been charged for what one commentator said, they faced a malicious attempt to rig the elections in front of the world, not only in Guyana? And I wanted to be short because we're pressing for time.
Well, if they have committed crimes, they should be charged, yes. If they have committed crimes, they should be charged.
Have they committed crime, in your view?
Allegedly. If there is evidence, let me put it this way, sorry, I put it the wrong way. If there is evidence that leads the police to believe that they have committed crimes, they should be charged.
What is your view? Have they committed?
This election story of rigging and all this kind of thing got to be brought to an end. The last election rigged was in 1985. My good heavens, is 85, 25 years since then. I mean, we're still going on with this thing.
Mr. Ramjattan?
People have to understand if they want to fiddle with the elections, they'll bear the consequences.
Mr. Ramjattan, be brief. Do you think they should be charged?
Well, they have to have the evidence first. And what we notice is that they have now been charged, and it is now they're going to ask for the SOPs. So what they're charged with, and I practice the criminal law for the major part of my lawyer career, how could you have charged and you didn't get the evidence? Now you're going after the SOPs. What nonsense is that? You wouldn't want that in America against the two of you. You will kick up a storm with your lawyers. But now they're charged, they ain't got no evidence because obviously they're now gone and say, well, we're going for the SOPs now and we want the SOPs and all of that. Look, the thing had problems. It was painful. It was very painful for me. And I must say that indeed, if anybody commit crimes, they must get the evidence and charge them. But don't start willy-nilly knocking around people, charging first and then going and look for evidence. That is wrong. That is an abuse of the criminal process.
Okay, quickly, Mr. Ramjattan, you first. Do you think APNU, do you think your government, the coalition, should have closed the 4 sugar estates, lay off some 7,000 workers, and which indirectly affect an extra 30,000 in various communities without alternatives to help those workers? Be brief, please, because time is of the essence.
I believe that we have every right to do that because it cost us $36 billion in 3 years to maintain that sector. And at some point in time, just like in Trinidad, St. Vincent, Barbados, so many countries in the Caribbean, you had to either close down or right size. We sought to right size. 4,900 or so workers, about 5,000, and they were paid their severance benefits. You have so many big companies and Google and all of them, 40,000 employees get knocked off. They get the severance benefits and they go. Prudence of our administration was that that is going to be the correct call to be made. And when you're in government, you have to make right decisions, like the coal mining industry that Maggie Thatcher had to make. You got to say, well, fine, you got to go. And I am saying that we had not the monies at the time because we were even hard put to pay the severance benefit. But we indicated to them, as soon as we get the monies, the training, and that is why we signed up the oil deal and all of that. We also would have the monies from the oil monies to ensure that they be retrained, get the assets they may need, the machinery and all of that for other types of agriculture. And
Okay. Okay.
Wait 1 second, Doc. Mr. Ramjattan, how much levy did the government collect from Gaisuko over the years from when Burnham started the levy?
It's a lot of money.
Billions, how many billions went into the national treasury?
All about. Gaisuko is supposed to bring money into the treasury.
No, my question to you, my question is, how many billions of dollars did the government collect in levy from Gaisuko when Burnham started the levy?
I think they collected about $800 million at that time in levies. It did not reach $1 billion Ghana dollars. Okay?
That's not true.
But whatever it is, or we can go and check the figures. But when you have today's generation of sugar workers, children, they don't want to go cut cane in the estate. Where are you going to get spending money behind that, all of that? This generation, do you see what's happening in the industry now? All over, they're striking. And these are the older ones, the newer ones that will be the working place of the workers for that place. They're not going. That is too back-breaking a job. We got to give them other kind of a white-collar job and service-oriented jobs and train them because they're bright people. They get 8, 9 subjects and all that. No, but you want them to go cut cake and go along with it.
No.
Okay. Mr. Ramjattan, here's the question.
It's important to understand that is a black hole. 300 you're selling for, 600 you're producing for.
That is not true either, Mr. Ramjattan.
Okay, but time will tell. Time will tell on that. Mr. Ramjattan, this question is for both of you. Political scientists have said that third parties in Guyana do not last more than 3 election cycles. And proof of this, the United Force, 64, 68, 72, it was actually diminished. Your party, the AFC, 2006, it was powerful. 2011, it became even more powerful. It merged in 2015. And based on what experts are saying, the party loss is base of support from the quarantine, Indian support, and everything else. Do you believe that the AFC can survive more than 3 election cycles by itself? It's without counting 2015 to now.
I believe so, Dr. Rose. And the last elections result after the 2020 debacle there, that last one, proved that we did even better, in my opinion. Look, we got 197,000 votes in 2015 and won a government. And if you were to take the figures of the recount, we got 215,000. That means a lot more votes. The combination got. I don't know which expert is advising you guys that the AFC is dead. A lot of people are exaggerating the early death of the AFC. But the AFC has its groundwork. We are going on outreaches where the COVID, of course, has a little difficulty with it. But all across the country, our regions, the AFC regions, have had elections held. I went to Bartica recently, and a number of leading members went to Essequibo and so on. And you can say whatever you want, but I am not going to allow this party to die. But
okay.
If you're want that to happen, well, fine.
But just to let you know, though, the 217 votes APNU, the coalition received, you have to remember this, 47,000 new voters came on the list in 2020, which is more than 2015. Mr. Ramkarran, do you think third parties can last more than 3 election cycles?
Well, I don't think so. I don't know what the number of election cycles, but
for 15 years, 5 years each.
Guyana is not a hospitable place for third parties. The history shows that.
That's right.
It has nothing to do with the AFC. The history shows that.
No, I know.
You all know the history. I don't have to go into it.
Right.
AFC, the WPA, United Force, WPA, and now and these are the 3 main, but they had a lot of other small parties.
I know.
Rai and all these people. So it's not a hospitable place for third parties, and there's a simple reason for that. The large groups, there are 4 large groups in Guyana. Indians and Africans make up the largest, and they're divided in two political parties. The mixed group is the second largest, about 10%. They're no, more than 10%. They're broadly supportive of APNU. And then there are the Amerindians, the other large portion of the population. They're supportive of the PPP. Now it's very difficult to make headway between those groups. What happened when AFC made? What happened when the AFC made important advances? There are two reasons. One is in 2006, PNC supporters did not want Corbyn, so they took away a lot of seats from the PNC. 6 seats. In the next election, 2011, the PPP had alienated sugar workers. Remember, the PPP threatened to deregulate GAU and all of these things.
Yeah.
And they had problems with wages and so on. The PPP had become very hostile to sugar workers. I'm not saying the PPP as a whole, but elements within the PPP. So that is what gave the AFC a great boost. Now, the end of the sugar industry, of course, it has some technical aspects that Khemraj mentioned, but it's a political thing. The closure of the sugar estates, Khemraj should have seen the politics behind that. It's not only the technical aspect, the politics behind that. You kill several estates and put so many people out of jobs. They get, sure they get severance, but where do they get jobs? There are no jobs anywhere. So once you do that to sugar workers, you're lost. The PPP hasn't. I don't think they have great potential in the sugar industry. I don't think the sugar industry has. But why the PPP decide to spend money in it? Because it's supporters. They're supporters. They don't want to fall in the same mistake like the AFC.
Mr. Ramjattan, one quick question for both of you. One of your MPs, Miss Amanza Walton Desir, said Indians are mentally challenged and they allow the PPP to tell them what to do. If an Indian person said that, there would be major repercussions. What have you to say about that? Was that a good statement she made?
I think you're very inaccurate because I was listening to the program. She never said Indians are mentally. She said PPP supporters. And
right.
You guys want to Indianize the thing. That's wrong. If she has a category of saying PPP supporters are mentally lazy and whatever, that is a distinctly different thing from saying that Indians are. I'm an Indian.
Mr. Ramjattan, who are PPP supporters and who are PNC supporters? 95% of the people in Guyana vote for the PPP Indians.
What you are saying and putting in her mouth is not what came out of her mouth.
But it's not semantic. That's semantic, Mr. Ramjattan. She meant.
It is not.
Okay.
Just now you were telling me that 30% of the sugar workers are blacks. Oh gosh. So what happened? PPP only Kulimana support them? They ain't got black supporters?
That's what the list is showing. 88.6% of Indians. 88.6% of Indians, Mr. Ramjattan, voted for the PPP in the last election.
We try to exploit these things from, and especially young politicians, which you senior people and professorial people should be enhancing. Amanza is an extremely bright girl. And even if she makes an utterance, which says is insinuating racism, you should come to her defense. But you're not going to do that. You're going to try to exploit it. And this is what also helps bring the polarization based on racism in Guyana.
But
the man who talks about racism, the worst in Guyana about Jack Dale, and call him ideological racist was Freddie Kissoon. And he wrote a booklet in it as to how racist was the PPP government. I don't hear y'all talk about that.
No, we know that. That's common. That you remember the PPP?
I feel that no, I don't think that she did anything wrong, and especially it's being put out of context.
Okay.
And in any event, if that was intended, I don't think she ever intended that. If that is what you're saying she intended, I don't think she ever intended.
No, I'm not saying she intended that. I just repeat the statement. But I asked her to come on the program to express herself, and she told me no. Mr. Ramkarran, what have you to say?
Well, it is how whatever Ms. Desir had in her mind is what is the perception that comes out of what she said. And the perception of what comes out from what she said is the same perception that most people have. Well, not most people, but many people have. That she was generally talking about Indians, and that she was saying these things about Indians. If Ms. Desir has been misinterpreted, she's a senior politician in the PNC. This is a racially charged polity. What one would expect Ms. Desir to do is to explain what she meant, or to make a denial or something. But having said that, in the absence of any denial or any explanatory statement, this discourse will continue. It will continue elsewhere on Facebook and everywhere else. And people will run away, if Khemraj is saying, with the wrong impression. People will run away with the wrong impression. So Ms. Desir needs to step forward. She doesn't want to do so. I don't think she can complain, because when you talk about PPP supporters, the perception is you're talking about Indians. So I don't think she can complain.
I know.
Having said that, it's very dangerous as a general statement. It is very dangerous to attribute characteristics on the basis of ethnicity.
True.
The Chinese people are miserly. The Jews are rich and miserly. That Africans waste their money on women and sport and dress up.
It's true.
And Indians are whatever. It's very, very dangerous, because those things are not true. They're not true. And people acquire these, if these things can be broadly be said to have some validity. People don't acquire these things because of their ethnicity. They acquire these things because of their culture and their history and and so on. So one has to be very clear. You have to be
Mr. Ramjattan, I will invite you in order to come back on the program and clarify it. Anytime you all want to come back.
I will try to persuade her to have a chat with you two. No problem.
And you can come with her too. We give you that.
Yeah. And gentlemen, I know
invite you to come with her.
There is one famous quotation: "Out of the heart and the mouth speaketh." So she know what she said, and she said it. Now, as I said, Dr. Rose, we asked her to come on the program, and hope she can come so we can go through that. Gentlemen, there's so many more questions we have for you two, gentlemen. Time has run out on us.
No, Mr. Ramjattan said we have to bring back more often, and I'm going to hold him to that.
Yeah, I think both Mr. Ramjattan and Mr. Ramkarran should come back on, because we have so much more questions to ask you.
That's true.
And we couldn't go through all the questions we have. So, gentlemen, I want to thank you so much. Mr. Ramjattan, anything in closing?
No, I've enjoyed being allowed to give my narrative of the petition and the F grade of the PPP and all of that. And thanks for giving me the opportunity. It explains a lot of things from my side to you. I also know how also the questions are, and it helps us both sides in a dialogue, in an engagement. And I very much appreciate my learned senior counsel, and of course, political mentor, the former speaker, Ralph Ramkarran. When we were P1 boys, we used to look upon these guys as, the stalwarts. I still do, quite frankly, and I'm glad that you are here with me. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Mr. Ramkarran, anything in closing?
Thank you very much for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity to address your viewers yourself and your viewers to answer your questions and to give explanations.
Thank you very much.
I hope everybody is satisfied. It's a privilege to be with Mr. Ramjattan. Thank you for your kind remarks. Thank you very much.
I can promise you everybody will not be satisfied because the views are so diverse that some people accept it, some will not. Dr. Rose?
I want to say both of you are men of wisdom. But Mr. Ramjattan, you will excuse me if I say Mr. Ramkarran is a man of greater wisdom.
No problem, no problem.
And Mr. Ramjattan, what I want to extend to you tonight, please tell the leader of the opposition to come on the program. He has denied us January month, he refused February month, he refused March. I invited him many times, he refused to come.
Okay.
Please convey that message to me. Ask him to come on the program. Tell him you are here and we don't sabotage anybody's questions. We ask you the questions and you explain to the people.
All right. Thank you so much for fairness. Thank you, audience. Thank you, Nohar Singh, and to Devin for bringing this broadcast to us. To all our audience out there, thank you so much. God bless us all and God bless our great country of Guyana. Thank you.
And gentlemen, when you're in town, visit the Nest restaurant.
Definitely.